Okay, I think we will get started. So, welcome to this ARCHER2 webinar on the Capability Days iteration number 3. My name is James Richings. I'm an architect here at EPCC, and I help to support the ARCHER2 service. So, first of all, this webinar is supported by the partners for the ARCHER2 service. So, this includes UKRI, NERC, and EPCIRC, EPCC, and the University of Edinburgh, and our vendor partners, HPE. So this is the third time we've run a Capability Days session, the previous two happening in March and June respectively. This time around, the dates will be from the 26th of September to the 28th of September in a couple of weeks' time, starting at 8 AM on the Tuesday and finishing at 2 PM on the Thursday. This is iterated on the previous sessions, and the configuration of Capability Days this time around is informed by our experiences there. So the bit about the motivation for running these Capability Days periods is to provide a facility to be used to test up and scale and help people prepare software and communities for future resources which may be much larger than or offer more performance than currently ARCHER2 does. Enable capability use cases not possible via other UK HPC services, and enhance the world-leading science from ARCHER2 by enabling modeling and simulation at scale that usually doesn't fit within the budget constraints of a given project. So this, to sort of follow up with that, some of the barriers we're trying to address. So in the past, there's some technology issues with running at scale, and this situation substantially improved since the ARCHER2 upgrade in the first half of 2023. So large jobs are now much more reliable on the ARCHER2 service as a result of this. And as I was just alluding to, Capability Days allows communities to run at a scale free of charge, which would otherwise be prohibitive to them, may use up large fractions of their research budget on single runs or individual areas of interest. There's also an availability of Scratch storage space that enables this, so that if people have limited storage quota, they can use the Scratch space instead to enable them to write out large amounts of data. There is a potential impact with running these type of facilities, because we are allocating a large proportion of the machine to running at scale. But we're aiming to, by running these in set periods, we're aiming to reduce the overall disruption for those interested in running at this size. And some standards resources remain available during Capability Days to allow the queues to function relatively normally during this period, though there will be some small impact to service. So some stats from the previous iterations of Capability Days. In the top left-hand corner, we have a matrix which shows the size of the jobs versus the amount of runtime that has been used per job. So we can see that most, or the vast majority of jobs are running in under an hour, but are getting right up to the very larger scales of large fractions of the machine being used by single jobs. And the diagram on the right is with the bar graphs is showing basically the scale at which different jobs are running at for different particular applications codes. So we're highlighting codes that are well known to us that we can easily pull out information on. But there's a variety of scales which certain codes are operating at, and seeing that people are really able to take advantage of this to get to very large job sizes. Something that should be to note is that there's really a limit here by the maximum number of MPI process counts, and we really start to get comparable to the, or go beyond the amount of MPI processes happening concurrently as compared to like exascale machines like Frontier, simply due to the way that we tend to use a single process per core on ARCHER2. And that means if you do 128 processes per node, 600 fully populated ARCHER2 nodes might be equivalent to running a significant fraction of Frontier. So just to give you an idea of why this may not be competing with the overall performance of an exascale system, you're still facing challenges which are similar to those systems at that scale. So for this iteration, how the queues will be configured. So as before, we'll have a, I think since iteration 2, we'll have a pre-capabilities day queue. There's a QoS for this called capability, standard capability days. This will run on the Tuesday between 8 AM and 8 PM. This is for jobs between 256 nodes and 1,024. To run on this, you need a positive budget, and the job time limit is 20 minutes. The purpose of this is to now allow people to start testing jobs at a reasonable scale before capability day starts, because I want to avoid situations where people set up scripts, get running, and get to the front of the queue and something falls over because of a typo. So this is to enable some testing in advance. Similarly, during the Tuesday, there is a NERC capability reservation that has been made available for the NERC community. Again, requires a positive budget, and it's available up to 1,024 nodes. For the capability days sort of main period, this is from Tuesday at 8 PM until Thursday at 2 PM on the 24th to 26th. Again, using the QoS capability days, which has not been updated on this slide, so I think it's been changed. And then we're running between 512 nodes up to 4,096 nodes. The job time limit there is an hour. That's informed by the distribution of work that's been going on in the previous 2 iterations, where the majority of people are running up to an hour at the larger scales, and this will enable people to get the most number of jobs through the queues during the time to allow as much usage and testing of this scale as possible. So jobs that run during any of these sessions will be uncharged. Users can queue work beforehand with this QoS. There will be a reduced number of nodes available for standard ARCHER2 jobs during this period, and users should expect reduced throughput and longer wait times in the standard ARCHER2 queues during this time period. So like I said before, there will be some minor impacts on the wider community for this. Some practical information. There is documentation provided in the usual place underneath the user guide on the ARCHER2 docs page under scheduler, and there is a separate capability days section. This covers a number of the tips and general information we'll go through here, as well as some example job scripts. And we'll provide full details on the limits available for this particular period. The limits on the number of jobs queued and running is based on budget code, not on a per user basis. So do coordinate between your people on your budget code if you're planning to take advantage of this period, as you will need to do a little bit of coordination there. The aim here is to have a wide variety of projects getting access. Users may well want to use the Scratch NVMe storage for jobs in order to be able to write out if there's a large amount of output data you're expecting. You also may see a performance impact of writing out to the Scratch file system as well. Access needs to be requested by the service desk in advance if it's not already set up for your project. So check your user account in Safe to see if you have access. It will be listed as Scratch A2FS-NVMe as example, shown on the bottom of this slide. You should see a line like this. Okay, so I've gone through general practicalities of the capability days period. Now to some tips and scaling advice. So please plan to what you want to do and what you want to run in the capability days period ahead of time. Test your job submissions and scripts thoroughly before submitting. So this is to try and head off the frustration that could occur if there's minor typos, and if there is a high demand for this window of running at scale, for people missing out because their jobs fell over, even though they may have queued ahead of time because something minor like a typo. So initial testing can be done in the short QoS or on the small node count as normal, without needing to run the full application. And then you can take advantage of the pre-capability days to do maybe testings at a medium scale. So that may be very short, but even that has a lot of value, just making sure that the job submission scripts are running and the application starts to go and executing. It may not be enough time to complete a full job, but this will at least allow some assurance that the jobs will start up. The startup period may well take longer than you expect as node count increases, so trying to estimate that with some initial testing would also be valuable. If you have multiple different runs that you want to do at the same node count, try combining them into a single job. This may enable you to get better throughput and do more testing. Here being, if you submit multiple jobs, you may wait multiple times, but if you combine them into a single script, you may wait once and run multiple tests in one go. As we said, if possible, submit jobs ahead of time, because there could be a queue, and it means that you've got a much more sort of higher chance of getting in and using the time effectively. Okay, so a few comments on MPI at scale. Please review your MPI communication pattern to understand if it has the potential to scale up to if you're using a very large number of nodes. All-to-all communication patterns are unlikely to scale well to the larger node counts. So consider what impacts this may have on your jobs. MPI transport protocols, we've noticed there can be some differences between the options available on ARCHER2. So our experience shows that OFI, so the default, works more reliably at scale than UCX. If you have a particular need to use UCX, you may want to do some extra configurations or environment parameter setting to make this more likely to succeed. So for example, if you're using the default UD or unreliable datagram protocol, you may need to set a longer timeout for this. So here on the right, you have export TLS, it's setting the UD as being one of the transport layers that is being set, and then you have two other environment parameters being set around timeout length. Putting it very high may allow this to be more reliable. You may also want to try different protocols. So on the right at the bottom, we have exporting RCDC and SM as separate protocols that you may want to try. Again, please take the opportunity to use the pre-capability days period to test out your jobs in advance if you're playing around with these settings at any reasonable scale. There's some more information around switching from UCX to OFI on the ARCHER2 docs page, and the link is the right at the top of the slide. Another consideration when running jobs at scale during capability days would be I/O. Again, think about your I/O pattern and whether it will scale to node counts you want to use. MPI I/O, for example, can have all-to-all-like patterns. If all MPI processes are involved in MPI calls, scaling may be poor. And consider what impact this might have on your jobs. Another important consideration is file per process type patterns that produce a lot of files. They can scale, but you need to be careful with this, as it may have impacts on the file system in ARCHER2. If each process is reading and writing multiple very small files, say less than 10 kilobytes per iteration, this can cause issues for the file system where there's lots of small files being operated on frequently. Especially we need to consider if the files are accessed, it is open and closed, especially if the file is in a single directory. So ideally, you should have no more than 1,000 files per directory as a guideline. So think about how you can reorder this pattern if you need to in the way you set up your jobs, if you have that capability. And if you see a potential issue with the scale of jobs you'd like to run, please contact the service desk if you have questions. We'd like to work with you ahead of time, opposed to you face issues during the period, if you think there's a concern after looking at your code and how it tends to perform. So understand how many files you like to read and write, at what interval, what size they are, and how they are structured in terms of how they're structured in directories. So you've some potential mitigation strategies. Can you reduce the I/O? Can you read and write files, fewer files, or read and write them less often in scaling tests? Can you consolidate your I/O calls? Read and write more data per operation. Don't open or close files every time you perform I/O. Can you use the NVMe, the solid state scratch space here? It may mitigate some of the risks, but it's not a magic bullet. So that's an option to you, but keep in mind it's not going to negate the previous comments. Python users also need to be aware that Python has its own issues at scale. Large numbers of process important Python modules can incur a large overhead. So be aware that there is Python specific limitations here to the way that Python works. Consider using tools like Spindle to manage startup. There's documentation about how to run Python at scale on the ARCHER2 documentation. And also note that standard I/O in Python can cause issues, as individual I/O operations may include multiple files, metadata operations. So you're starting to, you may not realize that you're doing lots of I/O, but Python may be doing it without you realizing. So if you're accessing a large number of files at very high frequencies, that can add an additional overhead to the file system. Again, look to reduce I/O load by reducing file count or frequency of access, or using dedicated libraries within Python. SDF, HDF5, for example, might be able to mitigate some of these potential issues. Again, testing will help you to identify these ahead of time, and there's the pre-capability days period for that. Okay, that's pretty much all I have to say. Just to summarize, the key dates are the pre-capability days period starts at 8 AM on Tuesday, the 24th of September, and finishes at 8 PM. The NERC capability reservation starts at 8 AM on the Tuesday and finishes at 4 PM. And the capability day session itself starts at 8 PM on Tuesday the 24th and runs through to 2 PM on Thursday the 26th of September. There is specific documentation on the ARCHER2 docs under the user guide section around capability days. I'll reiterate my comments. Please test jobs before launching using the short QoS ahead of time to check script correctness. Please use the pre-capability days or NERC capability to check the application startup at scale. This won't get you to the very largest scales, but at least allow you to check that things are at least running at moderate scale. Review your MPI approach and understand if scaling issues, things like all-to-all communications and the type of protocols you're going to use might have impacts on your code performance, startup times. Review your I/O strategy. Ensure you're not doing something that may cause lots of files to be manipulated on the file system that are very small frequently, and consider reducing I/O load, especially when running at scale. And you have the option to make use of the scratch storage space, which may help to mitigate some of these. It's, again, not going to solve them all, but may help to reduce the impact. And also, a final point on feedback, we try to we send around a survey after each capability days to see how people engage with this opportunity, and if there's ways we can improve in future iterations. I expect we will be sending around that after this period again. Please take the opportunity to provide us information and updates around how you found the experience and ways it can be improved in future, because I think the idea is we will continue to do these. They've been seen to have had value to the community, but we want to continue to iterate on them. That's all I had to say. If there are questions, I will happily answer any questions. Otherwise, we can end the recording. Okay. So there doesn't seem to be any questions currently. I will finish there.
Thank you very much, James.
Thank you everyone for attending. Speak to you soon. Email me if there's specific questions.